Sam, it is so lovely to see you in person. Congratulations on this whole entire thing. I think when it comes to this film, one of the messages is if you didn't push, it wouldn't have happened. You pushed. All of this has happened. You're also front page of the newspapers as well. I mean, did you ever think that we would ever get to a place like this?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, it's beyond the wildest dreams to be even, working at Newsnight, booking interviews. It's an incredible job. And obviously I was a part-time single mum, doing it myself, just kind of plugging away, trying to get content for the programme. And you never really believe you're going to get any content, let alone with a member of the royal family, let alone Prince Andrew talking about his friendship with a renowned paedophile and sex offender. So the whole thing is so far removed from what I thought was possible. It's really been an incredible roller coaster to have this experience. And for it to end in a Netflix movie, I mean, even if you were, really being kind of like crazy and fantasizing about your life, you could never imagine from that first email we'd be here today talking about a Netflix movie.
I mean, it's amazing that the journey that you've only been on is, I mean, it's a testament to your hard work, but it is also extraordinary. But I will say, from this film, obviously hearing, I mean, some of the scenes, I know you had a bit of push, some of the scenes showed your character having a bit of pushback from the newsroom and all of that stuff, and you trying to book kind of the more irreverent guests. I mean, was Newsnight a tough place to work? Because at times with Billie's character, it seemed like at times that it was.
I think the thing that made it tough in a sense wasn't my colleagues, who were all really lovely and a pleasure to work with, but it was my own kind of like passion to make things happen. I was very personally invested, as you can see in my character, in making sure that we had content. I was very personally invested in trying to do the best for people who were watching. I really cared about beating other places at the BBC and elsewhere for content. So I was in a competition, I suppose, with myself. And so that passion which you see on the screen is trying to encapsulate, to tell you that I was someone that really, really cared about my job. And sometimes that would be a little bit aggravating, I'm sure, to other people I worked with. And sometimes that would cause moments of friction, because a newsroom is a high-tension place.
Oh yeah, don't I know it?
Don't you know it? So largely, of course, we all get on brilliantly, and Newsnight was largely like a family. But there were moments, of course, where you lost your temper, and there were moments where you were trying so hard to bring something to air, and it felt like other people were resisting it. So I would say that that tenacity comes hand in hand with passion, and that passion sometimes would spill over into me being a bit grumpy when I didn't get things that I wanted.
Well, I mean, and the thing is as well, like when for example, Billie's character, you tried to
So
book
meta,
I know,
Josh.
it's so weird, isn't it? But like, for example, when there was the whole kind of scene about booking Lupita Nyong'o for the programme, and then there was the kind of resisting, and even though it would have been an amazing interview, and it was an amazing interview as well, there's almost a kind of urge to kind of just do things by the book, especially at the BBC. Do you think there is a kind of lack of creativity that we see in news, and do you think news as an industry needs more of it?
I think that in truth, there's so much to do in news. You are in an impossible situation. We had to make 40-something minutes of television from scratch every day with a small team. The pressures are immense. My unique selling point, I suppose, in that environment was that although I was rubbish, I'm going to be honest with you, at making those pretty films, like everyone wanted to be a Scorsese, I didn't care about that. I wanted to get headlines.
Yeah.
I wanted to make news.
Looking for those
Exactly.
those lines.
Exactly
Yeah.
that, Josh. So my motivation was, if we do content and no one ever hears about it, then why am I doing all this hard work? So I was always pursuing us getting news lines. And I suppose, in a sense, that's why I think I have a skill for, is working out that if you have someone who is one of the most famous, actresses in the world at that stage, talking about colorism, on the face of it, that's not very Newsnight, but on the face of news and the sophisticated way we could approach it, that's going to make news.
And that's the thing, looking at the kind of wider lexicon,
Correct.
looking at the wider kind of landscape, I think that kind of broad approach is very important. But if we look at, let's just say, this project in particular, when you were on set as Rufus and Gillian were filming the interview,
Can we just take a moment? Oh my God.
like, how was that for you? Because you, of course, were in the room when it actually happened, but then being in the room when it was effectively happening again, how did you feel rewatching it? And was it just as shocking that time around as well for you?
In a sense, it was even more shocking because obviously Gillian's performance and Rufus's performance is just spine-tingling. And they filmed it in one go, over 2 days.
Yeah.
And at that stage, they'd not actually met on set before. So it was just like being at the palace when it was, in a sense, like a duel, as Gillian says in the movie. You know, the two of them are facing off. They both have so much at stake. And when I was there watching it all over again, to be seeing them recreate that and to feel that palpable tension, even on the set, was extraordinary. And there was a moment where I closed my eyes and it was like being there all over again. The performances are so perfect. The undulation of the voice, Rufus's physicality, Gillian's repose. It's like being there again. And there were moments where I couldn't really work out whether it was 4 years prior or whether we were in a movie.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was just a real moment, as you can imagine. It was quite emotional and profoundly impressive that they managed to convince me, the person who had actually been there, that I was there again.
And also as well, because when I saw the movie, I was surprised by the general tone of it, because the tone, especially of Rufus's performance, absolutely incredible, because it's kind of this approach of it's so bad that it's laughable. Is that the tone that you think you wanted for a project like this as well? And when watching the final product of the film as a whole, how do you feel?
I think ultimately anyone who's consuming content, particularly when it's entertainment, understands that everything is not black and white. You know, this was a hugely important, serious interview, but there were a huge number of comedic moments. And so what Philip Martin and, you know, Peter Moffat, who wrote the screenplay, does so skillfully is they manage to take you on the journey of all of that. There are moments where you feel profoundly moved, concerned about this interview. You're concerned for Emily. You're worried about my character. You know, you're worried about me and my mum. You know, there are moments that are moving and you're watching it and you know what's at stake. And in the average life, you have levity and you have seriousness, and every newsroom is the same. Yeah. So I feel the tone really reflects, if you like, our trust in the viewer of the movie and the viewer of this kind of content to draw their own conclusions. They don't need to be led by the hand to, you know, make their conclusions. Rufus's performance allows you to draw your own conclusions, which is exactly what I always tried to do when the BBC was doing content. Let the viewer decide on their own.
And finally, just a very quick question as well. You know, we've seen previous BBC interviews. I think of Laura Koonsberg with Michelle Mone, obviously the Panorama interview with a princess that we shall not mention for reasons. Do you think it's ever a good idea to do a proper big interview with the BBC now?
I'll give you the same response that I gave to Prince Andrew when he asked me if it was a good idea to do this interview. And my answer is this: if you have good answers, if you're going to do a good performance, if you have things to say that are going to change the narrative on you, if you're sincere, and if you're able to articulate those things in a way that are going to convince the audience around to your way of thinking, do it. But the problem, Josh, comes is that everyone thinks that they can do that. And so few actually can. So self-knowledge is really the key when deciding to do these kinds of interviews. Because if you have 1 million people telling you you're amazing, you begin to believe it. So be careful that you always keep self-knowledge and humility when making a decision about being in front of Laura Koonsberg or Emily Maitlis. That would be my advice.
So true. Sam McAllister, thank you so much.
Pleasure.